The melody drifted through the dry Texas air like a promise, catching Zachary Quinn's attention as he rode past the small boarding house on the outskirts of Fort Worth in the summer of 1876. He pulled his horse to a stop, captivated by the pure, sweet voice that seemed to transform the dusty afternoon into something magical. The woman was hanging laundry on a line behind the house, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, and she sang an old folk song as she worked, seemingly unaware that anyone might be listening. Zachary had been riding for 3 weeks, coming back from a cattle drive that had taken him all the way to Kansas. He was tired, dusty, and ready to find a place to rest, but that voice stopped him in his tracks. Without thinking much about it, he found himself humming along to the tune, one he remembered his mother singing when he was a boy. The harmony seemed to float on the breeze, and suddenly the woman stopped her work, turning to look at him with wide eyes. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps 22 or 23, with a face that was pretty in an unconventional way. Her eyes were the color of honey in sunlight, and right now they were staring at him with a mixture of surprise and wariness. "I apologize, miss," Zachary said, removing his hat. "I did not mean to intrude. Your singing, it reminded me of home." The woman studied him for a long moment, her hand still holding a damp sheet. "You have a good voice," she said finally, her tone cautious but not unfriendly. "Most men around here sound like they are strangling a cat when they try to carry a tune." Zachary laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to ease some of the tension between them. "My mother insisted all her children learn to sing properly, said it was good for the soul. She was right about that." The woman returned to hanging the sheet, but he noticed she was watching him from the corner of her eye. "Are you passing through Fort Worth, or staying?" "Staying for a bit, I think. I have been on the trail for a while, need to find work that does not involve sleeping on the ground." He dismounted, leading his horse closer but maintaining a respectful distance. "This boarding house taking on guests, it is. My aunt runs it. Room and board, 3 meals a day, reasonable rates." She secured the last corner of the sheet and picked up another from the basket at her feet. "I can fetch her if you are interested." "I would appreciate that." Zachary tied his horse to a nearby post. "I am Zachary Quinn, by the way. Most folks call me Zach. Gemma Edwards." She set down the sheet and wiped her hands on her apron. "Wait here, I will get Aunt Margaret." As she disappeared into the house, Zachary took a moment to look around. The boarding house was modest but well-maintained, with a fresh coat of white paint and a garden that showed signs of careful tending. Fort Worth was growing fast, he had heard, with the railroad bringing in more people every month. There would be work here, opportunities for a man willing to put in the effort. Gemma returned with an older woman who had the same honey-colored eyes and a warm, welcoming smile. "Mr. Quinn, I am Margaret Porter. Gemma tells me you are looking for a room." They settled on terms quickly. The room was small but clean, with a window that looked out over the garden. The price was fair, and Mrs. Porter explained that meals were served at specific times, no exceptions unless a guest had work that required different hours. Zachary paid for 2 weeks in advance and carried his few belongings upstairs. When he came back down, Gemma was in the kitchen, helping her aunt prepare the evening meal. Through the open doorway, he could hear them talking quietly, their voices blending with the sounds of cooking. He hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but Mrs. Porter spotted him and waved him in. "No need to be shy, Mr. Quinn. In this house, guests are family. If you have time before supper, you could wash up at the pump out back. We eat in about an hour." The evening meal was simple but delicious: beef stew with fresh bread and vegetables from the garden. There were 4 other boarders, all men who worked in various capacities around Fort Worth. They were friendly enough, asking Zachary about his journey and sharing news about work opportunities in town. Gemma served the meal but did not sit with them, instead eating later with her aunt in the kitchen. After supper, Zachary went out to the front porch, enjoying the cooler evening air. He had just lit a cigarette when Gemma came out carrying a broom. "Do you mind?" she asked, gesturing to the porch floor. "Not at all." He moved to the steps, giving her room to work. "That was a fine meal. Your aunt is a good cook. She taught me everything I know." Gemma swept methodically, working around the furniture. "Have you found work yet, or are you still looking?" "Still looking. One of the fellows at dinner mentioned a ranch about 10 miles out that might be hiring. Thought I would ride out there tomorrow." "The Patterson place." "Yes, they are always looking for hands. It is hard work, though, and Mr. Patterson has a temper." "I am used to hard work." Zachary watched her as she swept, noticing the grace in her movements. "What about you? Do you work only here, or do you have other employment?" "Just here. My aunt took me in 5 years ago after my parents died. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I help with the boarding house, and in return I have a home and a purpose." There was no self-pity in her voice, just a statement of fact. "I am sorry about your parents." "Thank you. It was hard, but Aunt Margaret gave me a second chance at life. I try to make her proud." They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of the broom and the distant noises from the town. When Gemma finished sweeping, she leaned the broom against the wall and sat on the top step, a few feet away from him. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment. "Of course." "Why did you really stop this afternoon? Most men would have just ridden on by." Zachary considered the question carefully. "Honestly, your voice caught me off guard. It has been a long time since I heard something that beautiful. Made me remember there is more to life than cattle and dust." Gemma turned to look at him, and in the fading light he could see a slight blush on her cheeks. "That is a kind thing to say. It is the truth." He stubbed out his cigarette. "Would you sing something now?" "Now," she laughed. "It is almost dark. Does singing require sunlight?" "No, I suppose it does not." She thought for a moment, then began a soft ballad about a sailor far from home. Her voice was even more beautiful up close, rich with emotion and perfectly controlled. When she finished, Zachary found himself joining in with an old cowboy song about the open range. Gemma listened, smiling, and when he reached the chorus, she added harmony. They sang together as the stars came out, trading songs and stories until Mrs. Porter called Gemma in to help with the morning preparations. As Gemma stood to leave, she looked down at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "It has been a long time since I sang with someone who understood the music. We should do it again. I would like that." The next morning, Zachary rode out to the Patterson ranch and was hired on the spot. The work was indeed hard, just as Gemma had warned, and Mr. Patterson did have a temper, but the pay was decent, and Zachary had never been afraid of long days in the saddle. He returned to the boarding house each evening tired and sore, but always hoping to catch a glimpse of Gemma. She was usually working when he arrived, either in the kitchen or tending the garden or doing one of the 100 other tasks required to keep the boarding house running smoothly. But after supper, if the weather was good, they would often find themselves on the front porch again, singing together as the day faded into night. It became a routine over the following weeks. Zachary would return from work, clean up, eat supper, and then wait to see if Gemma would join him. She did not come every night, but when she did, those hours of music and conversation became the highlight of his day. They learned each other's songs, their voices blending more perfectly with each passing evening. The other boarders teased Zachary good-naturedly about his singing sessions with Gemma, but he did not care. He found himself thinking about her during the long days at the ranch, remembering the way her face lit up when she sang, the sound of her laughter when he told her a funny story from his travels. Mrs. Porter noticed too, though she said nothing at first. Zachary caught her watching them occasionally, her expression thoughtful. He wondered what she saw, what she thought about the cowboy who had stumbled upon her niece singing and had not left since. One evening, about a month after Zachary had arrived in Fort Worth, he returned to the boarding house to find Gemma sitting on the porch steps, her face troubled. She looked up when she heard his horse, and he saw that her eyes were red from crying. What happened? He dismounted quickly, concern flooding through him. It is nothing, just a difficult day. She wiped at her eyes, clearly embarrassed to be seen like this. It does not look like nothing. He sat beside her, careful to maintain a proper distance. You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but I am a good listener. Gemma was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the street. Finally, she said, "There was a man here today, Mr. Thornton. He owns the mercantile in town. I know him. Older fellow, always wears a fancy vest." "Yes." "He came to speak with Aunt Margaret about me. He wants to court me with the intention of marriage." She said the words flatly, without emotion. Zachary felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What did your aunt say?" "She said it was my decision. But she also pointed out that Mr. Thornton is wealthy, established, could give me a comfortable life, that I should consider it seriously." Gemma finally looked at him. "I do not want to marry him, Zach. He is kind enough, I suppose, but he is twice my age and I feel nothing for him. But I also do not want to be a burden on my aunt forever." "You are not a burden. Anyone can see how much you do around here. That is not the same as having my own life, my own future." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I am 23 years old. Most women my age are already married with children. What if this is my only chance?" Zachary wanted to tell her it was not, that she deserved better, that she should wait for love. But what right did he have to say such things? He was just a cowboy with little to his name, someone who had happened to hear her singing one day. Still, the thought of her married to someone else, especially someone she did not love, made his chest ache. "What do you want, Gemma?" he asked quietly. "I want what my parents had. They were so in love, even after 20 years of marriage. I saw the way my father looked at my mother like she was his whole world. I want that. Is that foolish?" "No, it is not foolish at all." They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Finally, Gemma stood up. "I should go help with dinner. Thank you for listening. Anytime." That night, Zachary lay awake in his small room, staring at the ceiling. He had been drifting for years, moving from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. He had told himself he liked the freedom, the adventure of always moving on. But now, lying here thinking about Gemma possibly marrying Mr. Thornton, he realized that he had just been running from the responsibility of caring about someone, of building a real life. He cared about Gemma. More than cared, if he was honest with himself. He loved the way she sang, the way she laughed, the way she moved through the world with quiet strength despite the hardships she had faced. He loved talking with her, learning about her thoughts and dreams. He simply loved her. The realization should have terrified him, but instead, it felt right, like finding something he had been searching for without knowing it. The next evening, Zachary asked Mrs. Porter if he could speak with her privately. They sat in the small parlor and he explained that he wanted permission to court Gemma properly. Mrs. Porter listened carefully, her hands folded in her lap. "Mr. Quinn, I appreciate you coming to me with this, but I must be frank. What can you offer my niece? You are a ranch hand with no property, no savings that I know of. Mr. Thornton can give her security, a home of her own, a position in society." "I know I do not have much right now," Zachary said, but I am a hard worker and I am good with horses. I have been thinking about starting my own horse breeding operation. I have some experience with it, and there is demand here with so many people coming through Fort Worth. It would take time to build up, but I could make a good living at it eventually. Eventually is not the same as now. No, it is not. But I love your niece, Mrs. Porter. I would work myself to the bone to make her happy, to give her the life she deserves. I cannot promise wealth, but I can promise that I will respect her, cherish her, and never take her for granted. He met her eyes steadily. I am asking for a chance, that is all. Mrs. Porter sighed. You realize that Gemma is the one who has to make this decision. I will not force her one way or another. I understand. I just wanted to make my intentions clear to you first. They are clear. And I will say this, Mr. Quinn. I have seen the way my niece smiles when she comes in from singing with you. I have not seen her that happy since before her parents died. That counts for something. 2 days later, on his day off from the ranch, Zachary asked Gemma if she would take a walk with him. They strolled through Fort Worth's growing downtown, past shops and saloons and the train station that had brought so much growth to the town. Eventually, they reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open land. I spoke with your aunt, Zachary said as they walked. I asked her permission to court you. Gemma stopped walking, turning to face him. You did? I did. I wanted to do it properly. But Gemma, before you say anything, I need you to know something. I am not a rich man. I do not have a fine house or a successful business. Right now, all I have is a decent job and a dream of starting a horse breeding operation someday. I cannot offer you the comfort that Mr. Thornton can. I never asked for comfort, she said softly. I know. But you deserve it anyway. You deserve everything good in this world. He took a deep breath. What I can offer you is my heart, completely and without reservation. I love you, Gemma. I think I have loved you since that first day when I heard you singing. I love your voice and your kindness and your strength. I love the way you see beauty in ordinary things. I love who I am when I am with you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. I turned Mr. Thornton down yesterday. I told him I was honored by his interest, but that my heart belonged to someone else. It does. Hope surged through him. It does. It belongs to a cowboy who stopped to listen when I was singing, who joined in with the most beautiful harmony I had ever heard. A man who makes me laugh and listens when I talk and looks at me the way my father used to look at my mother. She reached for his hands. I love you too, Zach. I think I have loved you since you first sat on those porch steps and asked me to sing. Zachary pulled her close, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. I am going to work so hard to build us a good life. I promise you that. I know you will. But Zach, I do not need much. I just need you, and a place where we can sing together at the end of the day. He kissed her then, soft and tender, and she kissed him back with a sweetness that made his heart soar. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, making plans and dreaming about the future. When they told Mrs. Porter, she hugged them both and immediately began planning a wedding, insisting it should be held in the garden behind the boarding house. The next few months were a whirlwind of work and preparation. Zachary saved every penny he could, and with Mrs. Porter's help, he found a piece of land about 5 miles outside Fort Worth that was perfect for a small horse ranch. It was not much, just 10 acres with a run-down cabin and a barn that needed repairs, but it had good water and plenty of grass. The owner was willing to sell it cheap if Zachary could come up with half the money upfront and pay the rest over time. Zachary worked double shifts when he could, taking on extra jobs around Fort Worth in his spare time. He repaired fences, broke horses for local ranchers, even helped build a new storefront for one of the merchants. Gemma continued working at the boarding house, but she also took in sewing to earn extra money. Every evening, no matter how tired they both were, they would find time to sit together and sing, those moments of music sustaining them through the hard work. Mr. Patterson, learning of Zachary's plans, offered to help. He knew good horseflesh when he saw it, and he believed Zachary had the skills to make a go of it. He agreed to sell Zachary his first breeding pair at a reduced price, to be paid off over 2 years. By the time autumn arrived, Zachary had saved enough for the down payment on the land. He and Gemma walked out to see it together, and despite the work it would need, Gemma saw the potential immediately. "We could add a porch here," she said, gesturing to the front of the cabin, "and plant flowers along the path. The barn is solid underneath all that wear. With some work it will be perfect for the horses." "You really see it, don't you?" Zachary asked, amazed. "I see our future," she replied. "I see us building something beautiful together." They were married in December of 1876, in the garden behind the boarding house, just as Mrs. Porter had wanted. It was a small ceremony with only a few guests, but it was perfect. Gemma wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Zachary wore his best suit, his heart nearly bursting with happiness as he watched her walk toward him. The preacher who performed the ceremony kept it short and sweet, focusing on the commitment of marriage and the importance of facing life's challenges together. When Zachary kissed his bride, the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. At the reception, several people took turns singing, but everyone agreed that nothing compared to when Zachary and Gemma sang together. Their voices blended in perfect harmony as they performed a love song that had been popular when Mrs. Porter was young. There was not a dry eye in the audience. They spent their wedding night in the boarding house, in the room where Zachary had been staying. It was not fancy, but it was private, and they were together. They talked late into the night, lying in each other's arms, planning their future and marveling at how much their lives had changed in just 6 months. "I still cannot believe you stopped that day," Gemma whispered in the darkness. "What if you had just ridden past?" "I do not think I could have," Zachary replied. "It was like your voice was calling to me, pulling me in. I do not believe in fate exactly, but I think some things are just meant to be." "I think so too." They moved into the cabin after the wedding. It was rough at first, with cold winds finding every crack in the walls and the roof leaking when it rained. But they worked together to make improvements, and slowly the cabin became a home. Zachary repaired the roof and chinked the walls while Gemma sewed curtains and made the interior as comfortable as possible with their limited resources. The first breeding pair of horses arrived in January. They were quality animals, a strong mare and a proven stallion, both with good temperaments. Zachary spent hours working with them, getting them accustomed to their new home. The mare was already pregnant when they arrived, and she would foal in late spring. During this time, Zachary continued working at the Patterson Ranch 3 days a week to ensure steady income. The other days he spent working on his own place, building additional corrals and improving the barn. Gemma helped when she could, though she also maintained a small vegetable garden and took care of the chickens they had purchased. Money was tight, and some weeks they ate a lot of beans and cornbread, but they never complained. They had each other and they had their dream. Every evening they would sit on the porch they had built together, watching the sunset and singing. Those moments, Zachary often thought, were worth more than all the gold in the world. Mrs. Porter visited regularly, always bringing some extra food or supplies. She never made it seem like charity, instead framing it as her way of clearing out her pantry or sharing an abundance from her garden. Both Zachary and Gemma knew what she was really doing, and they were grateful, though they looked forward to the day when they could stand fully on their own. In April, when the wildflowers were blooming across the Texas prairie, Gemma told Zachary she was pregnant. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed, and told him to put her down before he hurt himself. They celebrated quietly that evening, holding hands on their porch and talking about what it would mean to be parents. "I hope our child inherits your voice," Zachary said, his hand resting on her stomach. "And your kindness," Gemma replied, "and your work ethic." "We will teach them to sing," Zachary said, "and to work hard and to find joy in simple things." "Yes, we will teach them all of that." The mare foaled in May, producing a strong colt with good conformation. It was their first successful offspring, and Zachary could hardly contain his excitement. He spent hours observing the colt, noting its characteristics and temperament. This was the beginning, the first step toward building the breeding program he had envisioned. Word began to spread around Fort Worth about the Quinn Ranch and its quality horses. Zachary had a good eye for matching horses to riders, and his fair prices and honest dealing attracted customers. He took in horses for training, breeding services, and eventually began selling some of the offspring. It was slow going, but it was steady progress. As summer arrived and Gemma's pregnancy progressed, they made preparations for the baby. Gemma sewed tiny clothes and blankets while Zachary built a cradle from oak wood, carving their initials and the baby's expected birth month into the headboard. Mrs. Porter provided advice and supplies, sharing her wisdom from raising children of her own years ago. Gemma continued to sing as she worked, her voice now carrying lullabies and soft melodies meant for the baby. Zachary would often join in, harmonizing with her as they went about their daily tasks. The music had become such an integral part of their life together that neither of them could imagine a day without it. One particularly hot afternoon in July, Zachary returned from checking the horses to find Gemma sitting in the shade of the porch, tears streaming down her face. He rushed to her side, alarmed. "What is wrong? Is it the baby?" She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is so right that it overwhelms me sometimes. Look at what we have built, Zach. Look at this life we have created together. 6 months ago, I was worried about being a burden. Now I have a husband I love, a home, a baby on the way, and dreams that are actually coming true. Sometimes the happiness is just too much to keep inside." Zachary sat beside her, pulling her close. "I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes I have to remind myself that this is real, that I get to wake up next to you every morning and build this life with you every day." They sat together in the shade, Gemma's head on his shoulder, watching the horses graze in the pasture. It was a perfect moment, one of many they had shared and would continue to share. In late September, as the Texas heat finally began to ease, Gemma went into labor. Mrs. Porter was there, having arrived 2 weeks earlier to help prepare. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Zachary paced outside, occasionally allowed in to hold Gemma's hand and offer encouragement, but mostly feeling helpless and terrified. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry rang out. Mrs. Porter emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son. Both mother and baby are doing well." Zachary rushed inside to find Gemma propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket she had made. His son. Their son. He approached slowly, almost reverently, unable to take his eyes off the small face peeking out from the blanket. "Meet your daddy," Gemma said softly, holding the baby up for him to take. Zachary accepted the precious bundle with shaking hands, looking down into dark blue eyes that seemed to look right into his soul. "Hello there, little one. I am your papa. I have been waiting to meet you." "We should name him," Gemma said. "I was thinking Samuel after your father. Samuel Quinn." Zachary tested the name, liking how it sounded. "It is perfect." They spent the rest of the morning as a family, with Mrs. Porter quietly managing things around the house to give them time together. Zachary sat beside the bed, holding his son while Gemma rested, and he found himself singing softly, the same lullaby his mother had sung to him. Gemma's eyes filled with tears again. "That is beautiful. Will you teach it to me?" "Of course." He sang it again, and she joined in on the second verse, their voices blending as they always did. Samuel seemed to calm at the sound, his tiny fist curling around Zachary's finger. The first months with Samuel were challenging. He was a colicky baby, often crying for hours despite their best efforts to soothe him. Gemma was exhausted from nighttime feedings, and Zachary tried to help as much as he could while still managing the ranch work. But they supported each other through it, taking turns walking the floor with Samuel, singing to him even when their own eyes were heavy with sleep. They discovered that Samuel responded especially well to music. When he cried, a few verses of a song would often calm him. As he grew older, he would smile and coo when they sang, his whole face lighting up. It became a running joke between them that they had created a music critic. The ranch continued to grow slowly but steadily. By the time Samuel was 6 months old, they had 3 more horses and had completed several successful breeding contracts. Zachary's reputation for quality and honesty had spread throughout the region, and people began traveling from other towns to do business with him. Life settled into a rhythm. Zachary would wake early to tend the horses. Gemma would manage the house and care for Samuel, and in the evenings they would come together as a family. They would sit on the porch with Samuel on one of their laps, and they would sing. It did not matter if they were tired or if the day had been hard. Those moments of music together were sacred, a tradition that bound them together. As Samuel grew into a toddler, he began trying to mimic the songs his parents sang. His first word was not mama or papa, but rather an attempt at the word sing, which came out as ting. Zachary and Gemma laughed delightedly and immediately launched into a song, with Samuel clapping his hands and bouncing along. By his second birthday, Samuel could carry simple tunes and remembered the words to several songs. Gemma would sing while she did her chores, and Samuel would toddle along beside her, adding his high, piping voice to hers. Zachary would come in from the barn to find them singing together, and his heart would swell with so much love he thought it might burst. The ranch prospered. After 3 years, Zachary was able to pay off the land completely and even purchase an additional 5 acres. He expanded the barn, built a proper training arena, and added several more breeding horses to their operation. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. When Samuel was 3, Gemma discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued to work around the ranch as much as possible, with Samuel always nearby, chattering and singing to himself as he played. In the spring of 1881, they welcomed a daughter. They named her Grace, and she was everything her name implied. She was a calm, easy baby who seemed content to observe the world around her with wide, curious eyes. Samuel was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help take care of her and singing to her whenever she fussed. The house felt complete now, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and constant music. Zachary and Gemma would often look at each other across the dinner table, surrounded by their children, and marvel silently at how blessed they were. As the years passed, the Quinn Ranch became known not just for quality horses, but also for the music that always seemed to be floating on the air. Neighbors would comment on hearing the family sing together in the evenings, their voices carrying across the prairie. It became a comforting sound, one that marked the end of the day and spoke of home and family. Samuel showed an early aptitude for working with horses, following his father around and mimicking everything he did. By the age of 5, he was already helping with simple tasks around the barn, always singing as he worked just as he had learned from his parents. Grace, meanwhile, had inherited her mother's beautiful voice. Even as a toddler, she could hit notes purely and seemed to understand rhythm instinctively. Gemma began teaching her songs formally, sitting with her each afternoon for lessons that were more like play sessions filled with laughter and music. Mrs. Porter remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting at least once a week. She would bring treats for the children and often stay for dinner, delighting in watching the family she had helped create. She told Gemma privately that seeing her so happy made her feel like she had fulfilled her promise to Gemma's parents to take care of their daughter. When Samuel was 6 and Grace was 3, Fort Worth experienced a terrible drought. The grass turned brown and brittle, water sources dried up, and many ranchers struggled to keep their livestock alive. The Quinn Ranch was not immune to these difficulties. Zachary had to haul water from town, an expensive and time-consuming process. Several of their horses lost condition. Though none died thanks to his careful management, money became tight again, tighter than it had been since their first year. They cut back on everything they could, and Gemma started taking in sewing again to earn extra income. The children were too young to fully understand, but they sensed the stress their parents were under. One particularly difficult evening, after a long day of hauling water and worrying about bills, Zachary sat on the porch with his head in his hands. He was exhausted and discouraged, wondering if they would lose everything they had worked so hard to build. Gemma came out and sat beside him, taking his hand. She did not say anything at first, just held his hand and let him feel her presence. Finally, she began to sing, very softly, the same song she had been singing that first day when he had ridden past and heard her voice. Zachary felt tears sting his eyes as he listened. After a moment, he joined in, their voices finding that perfect harmony they had discovered years ago. The song seemed to ease some of the weight on his shoulders, reminded him of why they did this, of what they were building together. When they finished, Samuel and Grace appeared in the doorway, still in their night clothes. Without a word, they came out and climbed onto their parents' laps. The 4 of them sat together in the twilight, and they sang. They sang old songs and new ones, silly songs that made the children laugh and beautiful ballads that spoke of hope and perseverance. By the time they went inside, Zachary felt renewed. The problems had not gone away, but he remembered that he did not face them alone. He had Gemma, strong and loving, beside him. He had his children, bringing joy and music into each day. They would get through this, just as they had gotten through challenges before. The drought broke in late summer with a series of thunderstorms that turned the prairie green again. Water returned to the creeks, the grass grew thick, and the horses regained their condition. Slowly, steadily, the ranch recovered. Some of their neighbors had not been so fortunate, forced to sell out and move on, but the Quinns held on. That winter, a wealthy rancher from Dallas came to Fort Worth looking to upgrade his breeding stock. He had heard about the Quinn Ranch and its quality horses. After inspecting their animals and watching Zachary work with them, he purchased 3 horses at premium prices and contracted for breeding services for several more. It was the biggest sale Zachary had ever made, and it gave them the financial cushion they had been desperately needing. As the ranch prospered, Zachary and Gemma made sure to give back to their community. They helped neighbors who were struggling, offering work or trading goods. They donated to the church and supported the new schoolhouse being built in Fort Worth. They remembered what it was like to have nothing and to depend on the kindness of others, and they wanted to pass that kindness forward. Samuel started attending school when he was 7, riding into Fort Worth 3 days a week for lessons. He was a bright student, but his true passion remained horses and music. Grace would start school the following year, but for now she stayed home with Gemma, learning to read and write along with her daily music lessons. Life settled into a comfortable pattern again. The ranch was now well established, with a reputation for quality that extended throughout Texas. Zachary hired a young man named James to help with the daily work, which gave him more time to focus on breeding decisions and training. Gemma continued to manage the household and the children, but she also found time to develop a small business teaching music to children from Fort Worth who would ride out once a week for lessons. The porch, where they had first sung together, had become legendary in their family story. They had added on to it over the years, expanding it to run along 2 sides of the house. It was where they gathered every evening, where important family decisions were discussed, where celebrations happened, and where they sang. Always they sang. As the children grew older, the harmony became richer. Samuel had developed a pleasant tenor voice, while Grace's soprano was pure and clear. With Zachary's baritone and Gemma's alto, they created a family chorus that was truly special. They sang at church services, community gatherings, and once at a celebration for Fort Worth's anniversary. When Samuel was 10 and Grace was 7, Mrs. Porter passed away peacefully in her sleep. It was a devastating loss for the family, especially for Gemma, who had lost her second mother. They buried her in the Fort Worth cemetery, and at the service, the Quinn family sang her favorite hymn. There was not a dry eye present. In her will, Mrs. Porter left the boarding house to Gemma. It was still a profitable business, run by a capable manager Mrs. Porter had hired years earlier. The income from it provided additional security for the Quinn family and would help pay for the children's future education. As the 1880s progressed, Fort Worth continued to grow rapidly. The town was becoming a city, with more businesses, more people, and more opportunities. The Quinn Ranch found itself in an increasingly desirable location, no longer quite so isolated from town as it once had been. Zachary was occasionally approached by developers wanting to buy his land, but he always refused. This was his home, the place where he and Gemma had built their life together, and no amount of money could make him give it up. Samuel, at 13, was becoming an accomplished horseman in his own right. He had his father's natural ability with horses and his mother's determination. He talked about expanding the ranch someday, maybe specializing in training horses for specific purposes. Zachary listened to his son's ideas with pride, seeing his own dreams living on in the next generation. Grace, at 10, had developed into a talented musician. She played the piano, having learned on an old upright that Zachary and Gemma had saved for 2 years to buy. Her voice was extraordinary, and she was already being invited to perform at various events around Fort Worth. She talked about becoming a music teacher when she grew up, maybe even opening a music school. One evening in the summer of 1886, as they sat on their porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness, Gemma leaned against Zachary's shoulder with a contented sigh. "Do you remember the first time we sat here like this?" she asked. 10 years ago, when we had just moved into this cabin, I remember. The roof leaked, the wind blew through the walls, and we had maybe $10 to our name. Zachary smiled at the memory. And yet, I was happier than I had ever been. Me too. I knew we would be all right as long as we had each other. We have certainly built something beautiful, have we not?" He gestured around them, encompassing the ranch, the house, their children laughing together at the other end of the porch. "We have, and it all started with a song." Gemma looked up at him. "I was singing while I hung laundry, just passing the time, and you rode by and changed my entire life. You changed mine too. I was drifting before I found you, just moving from place to place with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, to build, to become someone better than I was." Samuel wandered over, having overheard their conversation. "Tell us the story again," he said. "About how you met." Grace joined them as well, settling at her mother's feet. "Yes, please, it is our favorite story." So Zachary and Gemma told it again, the story they had recounted countless times but which never grew old. They talked about that hot summer day in 1876, about Gemma singing while she worked and Zachary unable to resist joining in. They talked about their courtship, the struggles of starting the ranch, the joy of building their family. And as they talked, they found themselves breaking into song as they always did, their voices weaving together in the harmony that had defined their life together. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as they always do. They celebrated Samuel's graduation from school and his decision to stay on the ranch rather than pursue other opportunities. They watched with pride as Grace's musical talents earned her a position teaching at Fort Worth's new music academy. They mourned losses and celebrated births, welcomed new horses and said goodbye to old friends. Through it all, the music remained constant. No matter what happened, no matter how hard the day had been, the Quinn family gathered on their porch and sang. It was their therapy, their celebration, their prayer, and their joy all rolled into one. Samuel married at 22, bringing home a sweet-natured young woman named Elizabeth who quickly learned the Quinn family tradition of evening songs. Grace married at 20, choosing a school teacher named Thomas who had a decent voice and a genuine love of music. Both couples built homes on the expanded Quinn Ranch, which now sprawled across 50 acres and employed several hands. Zachary and Gemma became grandparents, and they introduced each new grandchild to music, just as they had their own children. The porch that had once hosted just 2 voices now regularly filled with a dozen or more, multiple generations joining in harmony. In 1895, Fort Worth celebrated its 50th anniversary as an incorporated city. The mayor, knowing the Quinn family's reputation, asked them to perform at the main celebration. 3 generations of Quinns took the stage that day, their voices rising together in songs both old and new. The crowd was mesmerized, and when they finished, the applause seemed to shake the very ground. Afterward, as they walked back to their wagon, a young couple stopped them. The man said, "Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, we just wanted to thank you. We have heard about your story, about how you met and built your life together. It gives us hope for our own future." Gemma squeezed Zachary's hand, smiling at the young couple. "Always make time for music," she told them. "Always make time for each other. Those 2 things will carry you through anything." As they grew older, Zachary and Gemma gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Samuel and his family. They still helped where they could, but they also finally had time to simply enjoy the fruits of their decades of labor. They traveled a bit, visiting other parts of Texas they had never seen. They spent long hours with their grandchildren, passing on stories and songs, but their favorite times remained the evenings on their porch. Sometimes it was just the 2 of them now, like in the early days, sitting together and singing as the sun set. Their voices had aged, not as strong or clear as they once were, but the harmony was still there, perfected by decades of practice and a lifetime of love. You ever regret it?" Zachary asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Choosing me instead of Mr. Thornton. You could have had an easier life, probably a wealthier one." Gemma looked at him like he had asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "Regret loving you. Regret building this beautiful life with you. Never, not for a single moment. You gave me everything I ever wanted, Zach. You gave me love and partnership and music and family. What more could anyone want? I am a lucky man. We are both lucky. We found each other and we chose each other every day after that. That is the real secret, you know. It is not just falling in love. It is choosing to stay in love even when things get hard." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Finally, Gemma began to sing, the same song she had been singing that first day when Zachary rode past. He joined in immediately, and their voices blended just as perfectly as they had nearly 25 years earlier. In the spring of 1900, Zachary was thrown from a young horse he was training. He broke several ribs and developed pneumonia while recovering. For several terrifying weeks, Gemma sat by his bedside, singing to him even when he was too weak to sing back. The doctors were not optimistic, but Zachary was stubborn. He had too much to live for, he told Gemma when he was strong enough to speak. He was not ready to leave her yet. He recovered slowly, but the injury took a toll. He was never quite as strong afterward, tiring more easily and suffering from occasional pain. He stopped training horses entirely, leaving that to Samuel and the younger hands. But he still walked the property daily, checking on things and offering advice born of decades of experience. Grace gave them a piano for their 45th wedding anniversary, a beautiful upright that she had saved for over a year to purchase. It was installed in their parlor, and Gemma played it every day, her fingers still nimble despite her age. Zachary would sit nearby, listening and occasionally joining in with his voice. They celebrated the new century surrounded by family, with dozens of people crowding into their home for a party that lasted well into the night. At midnight, they gathered on the porch, as they always did, and sang. 3 generations raised their voices together, filling the Texas night with harmony. Zachary and Gemma stood in the center, holding hands and looked around at everything they had built. Children, grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a home filled with love and music. It had all started with a song, with Gemma singing while she worked and Zachary unable to resist joining in. That moment had changed everything, had set them both on a path that led to this beautiful life. As the years moved forward, both Zachary and Gemma slowed down. They spent more time sitting than working, more time remembering than planning. But they remained deeply in love, partners in every sense of the word. They still sat on their porch every evening that weather allowed, still sang together, though their voices were thin and wavering now. One evening in the summer of 1905, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, Gemma rested her head on Zachary's shoulder. "Sing with me," she said softly. He did not ask what song. He simply began the tune that had brought them together all those years ago, and she joined in immediately. Their voices, though aged and sometimes shaky, still found that perfect harmony. They sang as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, as the familiar sounds of their ranch settled into evening quiet. When the song ended, they sat in peaceful silence, holding hands and watching the night deepen around them. "Thank you," Gemma whispered. "For what? For stopping that day, for hearing me sing and choosing to join in, for building this life with me, for every moment, every song, every day we have had together." "It has been my greatest joy and my greatest privilege," Zachary replied. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. They stayed there until Grace came looking for them, worried that they were getting chilled. She helped them inside, settling them in their bedroom where a fire was already burning cheerfully in the hearth. As Zachary and Gemma lay in bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms as they had been for over 40 years, they talked quietly about their life together. They remembered the struggles and the triumphs, the sorrows and the celebrations. They talked about their children and grandchildren, about the legacy they were leaving behind. "Our love story will continue through them," Gemma said. "Every time they sing together, every time they choose love and partnership, we will be there in spirit." "That is a good legacy to leave," Zachary agreed. They drifted off to sleep still holding each other, and in their dreams they were young again, sitting on a porch with their whole lives ahead of them, singing together as the Texas sun set behind them. The Quinn family continued to thrive for generations after. The ranch remained in family hands, passed down from parent to child, always maintaining the values that Zachary and Gemma had instilled. The tradition of gathering to sing together on the porch never stopped, becoming something that bound the family together even as it grew and spread. Zachary lived to be 78 years old, passing away peacefully in 1910, with Gemma holding his hand and singing softly to him. True to form, his last words were part of a song lyric. Gemma lived another 6 years, spending her days surrounded by family and her evenings on the porch they had built together, singing the songs she and Zachary had loved. She taught her grandchildren and great-grandchildren all the old tunes, making sure their story would never be forgotten. When she passed in 1916, at the age of 82, the family gathered for a celebration rather than just a funeral. They sang on the porch of the ranch house, their voices rising in harmony just as Zachary and Gemma would have wanted. And though the two were gone, their love story lived on in every note, in every child who learned to sing, in every couple who chose to build a life together with music and love. The house still stands today, over a century later, on land that remains in the Quinn family. And on summer evenings, if you listen carefully, you might still hear singing drifting on the breeze, a reminder of the cowboy who stopped to listen to a woman singing while she worked, who joined in with his own voice. And together, they sang their way into a life filled with love, music, and happiness beyond measure. Their story became a local legend in Fort Worth, passed down through generations. The boarding house where they met has been converted into a museum with a plaque that tells the story of Zachary and Gemma Quinn. Their wedding photograph hangs in the Fort Worth Historical Society, and recordings of their grandchildren singing the old songs they taught them are preserved in the city's archives. But more than the historical markers and the preserved artifacts, their legacy lives in the values they embodied and passed down. Hard work combined with joy. Partnership built on respect and genuine love. The understanding that the simplest pleasures, like singing together at the end of a long day, are often the most meaningful. Family reunions still happen at the ranch every summer, with descendants traveling from all over the country to gather at the place where it all began. They tour the expanded ranch, now a successful horse breeding operation known throughout Texas and beyond. They visit the cemetery where Zachary and Gemma are buried side by side, their shared headstone engraved with musical notes. And always, without fail, they gather on that porch and they sing. The songs change with the generations, incorporating new styles and modern melodies, but the tradition remains the same. The Quinn family sings together, their voices rising in harmony, keeping alive the legacy of a cowboy and a young woman who found each other through music and built something lasting and beautiful. Every spring, the Fort Worth Music Academy, where Grace Quinn once taught, holds the Quinn Memorial Scholarship Competition. Young musicians compete for funding to further their education, and the winner is announced at a special concert where Quinn family members perform songs from Zachary and Gemma's era. It is a celebration of music, family, and the enduring power of love. The ranch itself has been designated a Texas historical landmark, recognized not just for its successful breeding program, but for its representation of what could be built in the Old West with determination, love, and partnership. School children visit on field trips, learning about the history of Fort Worth and the families that shaped it. They hear the story of Zachary and Gemma, and they learn that sometimes the most extraordinary lives grow from the simplest moments. In the main house, preserved exactly as it was when Zachary and Gemma lived there, sits the piano that Grace gave them for their anniversary. It is still played regularly, kept in perfect tune by a family member who made it his life's work. The porch still has the same wooden boards that Zachary laid down with his own hands, though they have been carefully maintained and repaired when necessary. On the mantel in the parlor, alongside photographs of multiple generations of Quinns, sits a framed piece of sheet music. It is the song that Gemma was singing that fateful day when Zachary rode past, the song that started everything. The paper is yellowed with age, and the notes are written in Gemma's careful hand. She had written it out in the early days of their marriage, wanting to preserve it forever. The story of Zachary and Gemma Quinn has been told and retold countless times, in books and articles about Fort Worth's history, in family gatherings, in classrooms. Each telling might vary slightly in the details, but the heart of it remains the same. A cowboy heard a woman singing and could not help but join in. From that simple act of joining his voice to hers, a love story unfolded that would inspire generations. Their love was not the dramatic, tumultuous kind often celebrated in stories. It was steady, enduring, built on mutual respect and genuine friendship as much as passion. They faced hardships, certainly, from financial struggles to health problems, to the general difficulties of building a life on the Texas frontier. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense. What made their story special was not that they avoided problems, but that they never forgot how to find joy despite them. No matter how hard the day had been, they sat together and sang. No matter how worried they were about money or weather or any of the 100 things that could go wrong on a ranch, they found time to make music together. That commitment to maintaining beauty and joy in their daily lives was perhaps their greatest gift to their children and their children's children. The values they lived by became family traditions. Hard work was expected, but so was kindness. Success was important, but not at the cost of integrity. Family came first always. And music was not just entertainment but a way of life, a method of communication, a source of healing and celebration. When Samuel Quinn was an old man, he was interviewed for an oral history project about pioneering families in Texas. He spoke about his parents with deep reverence and obvious love. "They taught us that a good life is not measured in dollars or acres," he said. "It is measured in moments of genuine connection, in work that has meaning, in love that endures." They showed us every day what it means to be truly partners, to build something together that is greater than either person could have created alone. Grace Quinn, in her own interview conducted the same year, said something similar. Mother and father had different strengths, different skills. But they never competed. They complemented each other, supported each other, celebrated each other's victories. And through everything, through all the years and all the changes, they never stopped singing together. That is what I remember most. No matter what else was happening, there was always music. The historical record shows that the Quinns were successful ranchers, respected community members, and devoted parents. But those bare facts do not capture the warmth of their home, the laughter that filled their rooms, the sense of peace that visitors always commented on. That came from the love between Zachary and Gemma, a love that started with music and was sustained by it throughout their lives. In Fort Worth today, there is a small park named Quinn Park, donated by the family in honor of Zachary and Gemma. In the center stands a bronze statue showing a man and a woman standing together, looking at each other with expressions of love and joy. They are both holding sheet music, captured in a moment of singing together. Children play on the grass around the statue, and on summer evenings, local musicians gather there for informal concerts, keeping alive the spirit of music and community that the Quinns represented. The inscription on the base of the statue reads simply, "They found each other through song and built a legacy of love." It does not tell the whole story, but perhaps that is fitting. The whole story lies in the hearts of those who carry it forward, who remember, who keep singing. And so the story of Zachary Quinn and Gemma Edwards Quinn endures, not as a dusty historical footnote, but as a living legacy. It reminds us that love is built in the everyday moments, in the choice to join your voice to another's, in the commitment to create beauty together even when times are hard. It shows us that the most meaningful things we can leave behind are not material possessions but values, traditions, and the example of a life well lived and deeply loved. Their story began with a song, and in a way, it never really ends. Every time a Quinn family member sits down to sing, every time the scholarship is awarded, every time someone visits the ranch or the park or the museum, the story continues. Zachary and Gemma live on in the choices their descendants make, in the music that still fills the old house, in the love that binds the family together across time and distance. It all started one hot summer day in 1876 in Fort Worth, Texas, when a cowboy heard a woman singing while she worked and could not resist adding his voice to hers. From that simple moment, from that perfect harmony, grew a love that would last a lifetime and echo through generations. And in that, perhaps, lies the real magic. Not that they found each other, though that was remarkable enough, but that they chose each other every day after, building their life together one song at a time, creating a harmony that would never truly fade.